days, you're going to get an evaluation form for each of the days. So if you wouldn't mind just returning that evaluation form, that would be brilliant. So we've got a Q&A or a clinic, or and there's lots and lots of amazing skill and experience in this room. At the end up there, Alistair was asking about GDPR. Has anyone had any experience of that? Anyone, can you put your hand up? Of how you've worked around that solution? If not, we'll find out, Alistair, and we'll send it round to everybody in the room. Anybody?
I think for us, for Falkirk Council, and Alan will probably be able to shed more light on this, is we definitely wouldn't be giving out names and addresses of tenants to our scrutiny panel. What we do is we identify tenants who are willing to participate, and we phone them and then put them in contact with the scrutiny panel. I think that was done with the repairs, Alan. I wasn't involved in that, but I'm sure that's how we approached it. We had to identify tenants that were willing, and I suppose it's a bit difficult there as well, because we're intervening, and we are almost, it almost looks like we're handpicking tenants for them to speak to. So yeah, it's a difficult balance with that one. But usually, you know, staff are able to identify folk, but we want to hear from the good, bad, and the ugly. You know, so I think there's a danger there that we could be accused of handpicking tenants.
Okay, Shona, you need to unmute, Shona. There you are. You're in now. No, you're not. You're away again. Unmute.
I'm trying.
Oh, there you are. No, you're gone again. You're now.
Oh, sorry, Leslie.
There you are.
The button's just that wee bit slow sometimes, and I think it's not working, so I'll press again, and of course I go back and anyway, know what I was going to say. Yes, always set at link. Yes, you have to preserve tenant anonymity, and that's always been, been very carefully handled, that link. As a scrutiny panel, I just wanted to let you know, as a scrutiny panel, we've undertaken the GDPR training that is offered to link staff, which was and I think, obviously, I think that's something that, scrutiny panels and tenant inspectors, whatever, should be doing.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for that, Shona. I appreciate that. Anyone else come in? Because I know that Margaret Anderson. Oh, here's somebody got the hand up. Who's got your hand up? Do you want to come in?
It's Colin.
Oh, hi, Colin.
Hello there. So what we're doing at Castle Hill, not specifically for scrutiny, but to try and get tenants involved, is we've grouped different schemes together, and we're hitting each scheme 1 week at a time. So Castle Hill will email out to the tenants in those schemes. Castle Hill will email out to the tenants with a date and time for a Zoom meeting. And if they join the Zoom meeting, so we're going to hold one in a morning and one in an evening during that week, and get tenants when they join the meeting, they will be speaking to members of the tenant panel, not staff. So that's how we're getting around it, and we're now going to be doing this weekly for the next few weeks till we get through all our schemes.
That's great, Colin. Thank you. It's really good. Yeah, Lisa.
Hi, it's just to let you know, Diane Evans has put a message on the chat. She's lost her hand. So she says that, you know what I mean. She says our staff would contact the tenants and arrange for inspectors to speak to them.
Okay, that's great. Good. If there's nothing else on that one, Margaret Anderson. Margaret, do you want to put your point across, or do you want me to make it for you? The one about the staff, Margaret? I think Margaret's maybe going to get her key.
Carry on.
Oh, right, okay. So Margaret was just saying about the role of staff not knowing what scrutiny was about. And Margaret thinks that would be a really good short scrutiny exercise to speak to staff and tenants to say, what were you told about scrutiny? What do you think scrutiny actually is? And I think that's a great point, Margaret. Yep, thank you for that. I'm sure a few heads nodding there. Lisa?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I thought that was a really great point that Margaret was making, because I know when I was working in Stirling, I had a lot of tenants involved, but trying to get the staff involved, they couldn't understand why they needed to be involved as well, and they couldn't understand why the tenants had an input in a lot of things. So I think there is a lot of training there for a lot of staff. So I think, yeah, that's definitely a good suggestion, Margaret.
I think Margaret's got her hand up and one other person's got their hand up as well. So I can only see where it says 45. So Margaret, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm going way back. It's a few years ago now. I was involved with a scrutiny exercise we did through South Ayrshire and into various customer service offices. And it was surprising the number of staff that, what's tenant participation? They didn't know anything about tenant participation, never mind why should we be asking them certain questions about anything to do with tenant services. So not just about tenant participation, I feel that that's what I'm suggesting for an exercise would be how much frontline staff that have maybe just drafted in for a day, something happens, somebody's sick, pull somebody at the office to go in the front. What do they know about tenants, and and what their boundaries are for what they could tell them at the counter or not tell them at the counter?
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. If they're going to deal frontline face to face with tenants coming in, whether it's to pay their rent, make a complaint, or ask for some service to be done, they should know a bit about what tenants' needs are and what their rights are. How much do these frontline staff actually know?
Yep, fair point, Margaret.
Like something that we could maybe look into overall nationally.
Yep, good point, Margaret. Thank you for that one. Someone else has got their hand up now. John, I'll come back to you, but somebody else there's got their hand up. Who is it now? Let me see if I can see.
Rita.
Rita? Hi, Rita.
Yeah, just to comment on that is that when we as a scrutiny panel undertake an exercise, we actually write a letter out to the head of the department, as telling him basically that it's what area we're wanting to scrutinise and to advise the staff in his department. For the most part, we usually do in the process of the meeting meet with the leader, but in actual fact, in our experience, we've also met with, if we have a question, say for example, about the database, which we think there's a problem there. They've actually, we actually meet with the person involved with that database and things like that. So certainly in Western Bartonshire, I mean, I do find the staff very open to it. Although at one point when I did give a report to the housing management team, I could see a couple of, of the people in the office kind of wondering, you could see right away, what's she got to do? Do you know what I mean? Because I was the only, well, if one of my colleagues came along for moral support, that was a bit daunting, but we did it, and I've, thought to myself, well, we're beginning to really own it now, and but it is a case of, and we also we actually explain what scrutiny is to them, that we're not there to criticise their performance, we're there to search with them to see if there are any ways that the system can be improved, so that they, so we don't have a problem like that in Western Bartonshire, so I'm quite happy about that.
That's really
but it is something to do, like we kind of introduce ourselves and tell them what we're about, and then get the feedback that way. Kind of reassures them. Yeah, absolutely. That's great to hear. We're not there to criticise. We're there to help and work together to improve things. Yeah, so, that's great, Rita. Thank you for that. Good. Donna?
I agree with what you're saying, Rita. I think that there needs to be quite a drive to inform staff, raise awareness of what tenant participation is for a start, and the various strands of forums and groups that we have and how they can tap into that to do their own work. I do think there is some work needing to be done internally in probably most organisations to raise awareness. And to be quite honest with you, I think raising awareness, the best people to do that is actually the panels. But that's about confidence and being able to describe and articulate what they're doing. The problem we've actually got a scrutiny panel, but we also have a committee service scrutiny panel, and that's elected members. And I think sometimes folk get confused between the two. when you mention scrutiny panel to staff, they automatically think it's the elected member scrutiny panel and not the tenant scrutiny panel. So I think some work needs to be done on that internally in most organisations. Over and out.
Thank you, Donna. I had a really important point to make, and then I lost the signal. So I can't remember what I was going to say. I think one of the things that I know that Tony often talks about, I remember what I was going to say now, is what happens in scrutiny years is the topic is quite often chosen by the landlord, and it's not necessarily what tenants want. So I'm seeing a couple of people shaking their heads. I'm really glad to hear that. It's a shared agenda. But just what Donna was talking about, we've for a few years now, I don't know if there's anyone here from Highland Council, but we've done training for staff across the Highland Council area. It's a massive area. We're talking about the size of Belgium. And this wasn't back in the good old days when I would go from Portree to Lochaber to Thurso to Inverness to Kingussie to Aviemore, and we would train small groups of staff only for 2 hours, and it was an introduction to tenant participation. And it was in the room you would have an allocations officer, homeless officer, a caretaker, housing assistant, housing officer, an apprentice joiner, an electrician, because Highland, it was housing and tech, and services, and we would have them all in the room at the same time. And we quite often found that like the apprentice joiners and electricians were just fantastic. They were so enthusiastic because it was very hands-on, it was participative, and it was a bit of fun. But you could almost feel their supervisor sitting there like that, saying, we'll have none of this sunshine, you're an electrician, you're not a tenant participation officer. But it really gave the staff an insight and an understanding of what tenant participation, what scrutiny is. Because I think Tony said earlier, scrutiny is quite a scary word. So there we go. I don't know who's shown that TP training is now included in staff training at Link, done by tenants. That's great. Thank you for that. So we've got another 10 minutes, I think, before Michael comes in. So I'm looking for some topics because it seems to be the Leslie Baird show at the minute. I'm really keen to get some other people coming in. Rita, you need to unmute. Yeah.
It goes automatically off there. It was just a comment on something that was said earlier with regard to the recommendations that a scrutiny panel will make. In our Western Berkshire Council, I don't know what others do, but we actually have terms of reference, which was an agreement written between the council and the scrutiny panel as to what what the work involved, the process involved. So in that agreement, we actually have, for example, if we make recommendations within 21 days, we should hear back as to whether or not the recommendations have been accepted and agreed. It's done formally when the report is given actually to the Housing Management Board. But we have it written in the terms of reference that if we are not satisfied with their response, for example, if they say no to recommendations or whatever, they can't just say no and leave it at that. They are obliged to come to us, meet with us, and to explain exactly why they feel they can't implement those recommendations.
Good. That's great, Rita.
And so that sorry?
I said that's great.
Yeah, no, but well, that's to say written in our terms of reference. The other thing is, which makes it in one way even better, is that if we're not actually satisfied with their reasoning for it, I mean, obviously we would take all on board and think about it, discuss it, etc. But if we weren't satisfied with that, it's written in our agreement that we can approach the housing regulator about it.
Okay, that's great.
It means that we actually have recourse, like obviously it would need to be evidence-based, etc., etc. But that's one way of dealing. So I'm presuming that these other groups that don't have that written in have just kind of stopped at that point. That just wouldn't happen with us.
Yeah, that's
apart
great.
from anything else, all the time that our people have taken, as you said, if that was happening in Western Berkshire, I'd be giving up tomorrow because I'm not here just to get told no.
Yeah.
by anybody.
Absolutely.
Unless for a very good reason.
Yeah.
So again, we've got that written in, so we've got it in black and white that you said that this can be done.
Yeah.
So to me, it's really important to make sure, or almost like to have some kind of agreement with the council or your landlord as to what you can, cannot do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Rita.
No.
I've got a few people got their hand up now, so thanks for that. I've got Lisa, then Alistair, and then Margaret. Lisa?
Hi, just to let you know, Claire from Aberdeen's put a message on the chat as well to say that Aberdeenshire Council TP team created an online scrutiny awareness training session in 2018 following getting ready for scrutiny training for all housing staff and tenants who want to access it. That can be accessed at any time that suits them. And Shona has also said that TP training is now included in staff training at Link and done by tenant engagement staff.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. Alistair?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that a couple of years ago in the Western Isles, we took Aberdeen Housing Partnerships repair and maintenance policy, which was coming up for amendment and the annual review. And we met with Shane Ballantyne, and it was the TP officer then, and we basically tore it to shreds and worked on it and put things back in, and submitted a report to HHP. The board actually delayed the reviewing of it until we had finished, which was really good. And there was points that they took on board and updated, and others that they couldn't because they were fixed in the current contract. However, the current contract was due for renewal in about 6 to 8 months later, and they put these recommendations into the current contract, new contract.
Good.
So all the recommendations we made are now in place in the new contract, which is really good.
That's great, Alistair. Really good. Some really good stories, really good positive stories. Margaret?
I'm just thinking back to what Rita was saying about terms of reference, etc., and possibly involving the regulator if need be, if they didn't comply. For me, that's a bit different when your TP is within the local authority rather than with a housing association.
Rita's in Western Barfordshire, Margaret.
Authority.
That local authority.
That's local authority.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Maybe Rita, would it be okay for you to share your terms of reference? I'm sure folk would be interested in that.
Well, basically,
no, could you send it to us? Could you send it to us? Yeah.
How you mean just now?
No, later. Yeah.
Right, okay, I certainly will do, because it is actually, I must say, it's really good. Send the terms of reference. I mean, it did. Well, I'll send that to you, Leslie.
It did make me think you were a housing association. And I'm not saying that we've got problems within our relationship with the local authority, but sometimes that might be something that people would think they couldn't do because they're controlled almost the local authority. You know, but rely on everything. Rely on them for finance, accommodation, and everything that enables us to be there. So sometimes I think that could be a barrier if there's, shall we say, dissent about anything.
Okay, that's great, Matt. Just to let you know, those of you who are tech savvy, that Tony's slides have been uploaded to the chat, but we'll certainly send them out to folk as well.
Oh, great.
So do we have any more questions or any more points? Anybody get any points? Rich, do you want to come in?
I was, I'm just checking that I'm not unmuted. I'm not muted. I was wondering, other than the ARC data, that seems to be the main focus of scrutiny panels investigations about what to examine. Is there any? Do you use anything else that to make the decision we're going to look at repairs or stair cleaning or allocations or whatever. Is there any other data sets that you're currently using?
Shona?
Yes, we look to customer satisfaction surveys quite a lot as well. Find quite a lot of information in there. I mean, because that's where tenants are giving their views of how the organisation and the landlord is performing. So, and you can see trends as well. Obviously, you know, you can see what's been happening over the last few years. So yes, we use them quite a lot.
Lisa?
You'll see, am I muted? I'm all right. Yeah, like for example, in our terms of reference, we've got 7 indicators there which we use, which is the performance indicators, satisfaction surveys, obviously the annual return and the charter, and we have an assurance and improvement plan. So there's an improvement plan in Western Bartonshire as well. We look at the annual report to the tenants, you know, what they've highlighted on charter performance, and we report from service review groups, tenant inspections, mystery shopping and focus groups. And in Western Bartonshire, we have the Western Bartonshire Tenants and Residents Organisation, which is a representative from each of the tenant resident associations. So they've got the associations and they've got an umbrella group which are in constant meetings with the council. So we would look at that, and also complaints information. I think it's complaints information we're now going to be scrutinising at the moment, you know, our new one. So
Thanks
so
for that.
we get quite, you know, a big variety stuff.
I think just for a point of noting that the Tony's presentation can't be downloaded from chat, so we'll just send it out to people. I think Lisa and Shona both had their hands up, and Donna from Falkirk was saying that looking at complaints patterns can sometimes work quite well. So Lisa and then Shona, and here's Michael coming in. Lisa?
Yeah, that was just Donna and Rita both picked up what I was going to say. Housing association I used to work for, we used to look at the complaints, and if there was a reoccurring complaint, then we would say, right, obviously there's an issue there, we need to look at it. So that's another good way of picking up when there's an issue. You find that a lot of people making complaints aren't involved in tenant participation, so it's maybe a good way of getting them involved as well, if you're getting a lot of complaints from the same people.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Shona, and then we'll move on to no, okay. So we're now being joined by Michael Cameron. Michael, could Elaine, could you mute everybody again except me? Okay. So we've been joined by Michael Cameron. Michael, as you know, is the Chief Executive of the Scottish Housing Regulator, and it's brilliant that Michael has agreed to join us today. So I suppose we top the presentation with the Housing Minister, and we're tailing it, and that doesn't mean that you're at the tail end, Michael. But it's a good start and a good finish, and the meat in the middle of this sandwich has been really good as well. So I'm going to hand over to Michael now, who's going to talk to you, and hopefully Michael will be able to take questions as well until the end of this session. So Michael, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Leslie.
Thank you.
And thanks for asking me along to this. Really keen to always kind of keep the conversations going around tenant scrutiny, and it's a great initiative that you've been able to host and stage the Scrutiny Week in such challenging circumstances. And you know what, in 8 months it's been. Today, by my reckoning, is day 240 since the start of the national lockdown on the 23rd of March. And as things stand today, we have no certainty about when things might start to return to normal, or indeed what normal might look like. Perhaps there's a wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel with the news last week around a vaccine, but it still looks like it might be quite a long tunnel as things stand. And I guess, you know, I'd be really keen to hear people's thoughts on what you've taken from the last 8 months and what you think it might mean for us all over the next 6 months and indeed into the longer term. But maybe just to start things off, I'll have a quick look at where we've been over the last 8 months and where we are now, and where tenant scrutiny fits in to all of that. So social landlords were amongst the first onto the front line in local communities to support people through the challenges of the early days of lockdown, and social landlords moved at pace to adapt to the new and challenging environment in which they found themselves operating. And we've seen landlords use their knowledge of their tenants and local communities to respond to their most urgent needs. Social landlords have worked hard to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on their tenants, people who are homeless and other service users. And by necessity, they've been prioritising that work over routine activity, and perhaps in some instances that's included planned for tenant scrutiny work. And of course, they had to respond quickly to the introduction of restrictions that formed the national response to the pandemic. And for many of you, that meant much of what you would have seen as core activity had to stop, or at least was reduced to much more limited scale. And as I say, that probably included a range of tenant engagement, tenant participation and tenant scrutiny work that might have been planned for the first 6 months of this financial year or so. Landlords are now reintroducing a fuller range of steps, starting to focus on the longer term planning for the coming years, and thinking about what lessons to take forward from the last 8 months or so. And I believe that brings tenant scrutiny and engagement very much back to the centre of landlords' work. We'll all need to do that planning and looking ahead in the face of new and emerging and serious challenges stemming from the wider impacts of the pandemic and the uncertainty that has brought and that remains for the time ahead. We recently published supplementary guidance on business planning to help landlords consider their plans in the context of the pandemic. So hopefully that will assist them in being able to work with tenants to think about what lies ahead. And so what might those challenges be? Well, some of the more obvious ones include the reality that we're going to be faced with the most challenging economic context in a generation. I've heard some people even say the most challenging context since the end of the Second World War. And so tenants and their families are likely to be facing increasing financial hardship. And that's going to have a range of impacts for landlords, not least on arrears. Now, we've seen a kind of steady increase in arrears over the last few months. It's kind of levelled off in the last couple. And while this hasn't exactly presented a kind of cliff edge for arrears that some had predicted, I suspect this one might be a bit of a slower burn. And I think we'll see some of the real kind of impacts of the pandemic on people's income and so on, things like arrears over the coming 6 to 12 months. And given the challenges, how do we maintain affordable rents in the coming years? We know that there are going to be a lot of challenges for landlords around potential growth in costs. Some of that will have been as a consequence of the last 6 months or so. Landlords are having to deal with inevitable backlogs across a range of service delivery areas in things like maintenance, lettings, voids, responsive repairs, planned maintenance, statutory safety inspections. All of these are areas that landlords are starting to recover some of the ground that was lost over the last 8 months. And we've got an enormous number of people now in temporary accommodation, the highest level we've seen since we started monitoring this. A huge number of people in temporary accommodation, much of which would not meet the standards that we expect of temporary accommodation. And so there's a huge task ahead for all landlords to start to deal with that. And then there's things like, how do you maintain effective governance when you're operating under the type of restrictions that we've seen over the last few months? And these are all just challenges that have kind of come up through the impact of the pandemic. And we've got all the other challenges that were always there and that we were facing. And, you know, I hesitate to say it, but, you know, we've got challenges coming out, things like Brexit, and what will that mean for landlords. So I think in planning for the future and setting ourselves to meet these challenges, strikes me that it will be so important to have an effective dialogue with tenants and service users around what's important to them, what they want, and what they can afford to pay for. An effective tenant scrutiny of landlords' performance and of their plans will help to get those future plans in as good a place as possible. Now, over the years, social housing has been amongst the most innovative sectors in Scotland, with a track record of rising to meet challenges it has faced, and that's a track record that we can take a lot of comfort from. And I think that you know, we're going to have to see how landlords can ensure that they have agility and responsiveness, how they can look to support tenants and how they can build in community resilience to the work that they have ahead. But as I say, I think landlords have already demonstrated a strong track record in responding to the range of challenges that have presented to the sector over the last 40, 50 years. So I think this is another challenge that we have to get ready to rise to. And I think tenant scrutiny, whether that's of performance, of plans, of rent rises, of whatever, has an incredibly important role to play in that. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions, comments, or thoughts.
That's brilliant, Michael. It's really painted a picture for us. And who knew, other than you, it was 240 days since lockdown. Has to tell you something, but I'm quite appalled by that. So thank you for your challenges and outlining them and really placing tenants at the very forefront of the future. I agree with you absolutely, and I think housing, of all the services we've seen, have applauded and have really come up to the mark. And that includes houses and communities, tenants working in their communities to give people services and to give people food. And I think that's really good to see that acknowledged. So now we have 15 minutes for questions or comments. Please keep them brief. Put your hand up. I might see the hands up. I might not. Who's going to kick us off? Anybody? Anybody get any questions? Any comments? Oh, it's a very quiet audience today.
No, nobody's coming in with anything, Leslie.
Okay, so can I ask a question then? I'll use the chairperson's is authority the right word? Do you have a view, Michael? Because so we've seen some very formal, Tony talked earlier about some very formal scrutiny arrangements and some very informal scrutiny arrangements. I'm sure both of them are effective, but I know that the regulator has never said there has to be a scrutiny panel, but you have to have a form in place. So would you want to comment on any of the kind of form that scrutiny might take now or in the future?
I think the most important thing is that it works, that it's appropriate for the organisation and in particular for how tenants want to engage. So, you know, I think tenant scrutiny can take all manners of forms, and I think no one organisation needs to have just one particular form of tenant scrutiny to rely on. So, you know, a landlord could have a formal tenant scrutiny panel with a very kind of structured approach to bringing tenants in to have a look at the performance, but equally it can have more informal ways to gather in views from tenants on performance, and all the way through to ensuring that it uses complaints in an effective way to understand what it is that might be causing tenants concerns. So I think there's a wide range of approaches, and some of them will be more appropriate in some settings and for some landlords than they might be for other landlords. The key thing for us, I think, as a regulator, is that a landlord's able to demonstrate that it is engaged in that meaningful dialogue with its tenants, both to look at how it's performing, but also to consider its future plans and what it sees as the key priorities, so that the views of tenants are fundamentally built into that.
That's brilliant, Mike. I see Shona's got her hand up. Shona? Shona, are you coming in? We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Shona. Are you there?
Can you take your mute off, Shona?
That's it. That's it. You've got you now.
The button's not working too well this morning. Sorry, folks. Oh, tech. I just wondered, over the last few months, obviously it's been very challenging financial times for all landlords, local authority and housing association. And obviously budgets, budgets have kind of not gone out the window, but they've had to be changed to cope with what have become absolute priorities. I wonder, does Michael have any concerns that TP budgets may have been used for other things, and that there may be a problem in the future getting TP budgets restored? Thank you.
We've been doing monthly monitoring of landlords across a number of key indicators over the last 6-7 months, and you might have seen the monthly dashboards that we've been producing on that. One of the things that we collect, and this is just from housing associations and co-ops, not from local authorities, but we've been collecting some financial information just to help us understand the financial impact on landlords of the last 8 months, the impacts of the pandemic on that. Now, as things stand, that hasn't shown any significant areas of concern in finance. So you'll be absolutely right that landlords will have to have adjusted their spending to address some of the immediate needs that have come out of the pandemic. But I don't think, as things stand today, that has had a necessarily significant detrimental impact on landlords. Now, who knows what's to come? And this could go on for a considerable period of time before we get to any kind of stable position. So that's not to say that there might be challenges ahead around that. But as things stand, it looks like on the financing things, it seems okay. So on that basis, there shouldn't really be any significant long-term impact on resources being available to support tenant participation, tenant scrutiny and tenant engagement.
That's a great question, Shona, and I think a load of people we've been talking to have been saying that their TP budget is way underspent this year.
Well,
a few concerns about it being swiped away, but we're saying, well, look, there's loads of activities coming up. We're probably going to be doing some training that we might look at your budgets for, and certainly our annual conference, which has been delayed again to the end of April. We'd be hoping that people would sort of putting that money aside to send people off. So, Michael, sorry, I interrupted there. I think you were going to come in.
No, you're okay.
Okay, thanks for that, Shona. That was really good. Do you have a supplementary, Shona? Yeah.
Well, not so much supplementary, but I mean, I do know, as you say, budgets, yes, I mean, budgets have been diverted, shall we say, for very urgent work that's had to be done, and that's obviously fair enough. But I do know some groups that haven't actually, some tenant groups or scrutiny panels, whatever words you want to use to call them, haven't actually met at all this year. They've really not got going. And that's concerning.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the point of the question, really. Thank you.
That was a great question. Thanks, Shona. Is there any other questions? Any other points? Nobody want to come in? You know what's going to happen, because we're going to shut down the session in the minute we do that. So I'm I wish I'd asked. Yep, nobody? Any other member? Oh, Mary Niven. Hello, Mary. I think you might have to unmute.
Right, I think I've got it now.
Yep, sounds like it. Can hear you, Mary.
Listen, this is just my second virtual meeting, and I'm absolutely terrified to press buttons in case you all disappear. But I just thought I'd say like how informative I found today. It's been a great help, and now that I've kind of, well, I wouldn't say mastered the technology, but now that I'm learning with the help of Shona, thank you, Shona, I'll be joining in a lot more to try and learn. That was all.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. It's been a very interesting morning.
I'm glad you didn't all disappear.
No, we're still here. So are you. John Duffy?
Yes, I attended a meeting of the British Institute of Human Rights, and they informed me that citizens of the United Kingdom have no right to a house. In Section 8, they say that once they have a house, it's got to be affordable, comfortable, waterproofed, etc. You know, it seems to me it's the cart before the horse. Would Michael like to say a word about that? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to pick up on that. When we reviewed our regulatory framework and published a new regulatory framework April last year, seems like a lifetime ago, but when the world was kind of normal. And that at that time we said that we wanted to ensure that our regulatory framework reflected in an appropriate way human rights and equalities requirements, and that we would work with social landlords to develop guidance that would help social landlords to place and set what they do properly in a human rights approach. Now, we, the last 8 months have unquestionably kind of slowed the pace of that work. But the first element of that is going to be guidance for social landlords on how to look at capturing and using to best effect information around equalities and the protected characteristics of people who are their tenants, who are applying for housing, who work for them, who are on their governing body. So that should be coming out within the next couple of months. It's been done collaboratively with the SFHA, the Glasgow West of Scotland Forum, and the Association of Local Authority Chief Housing Officers. So it will be a sector piece that will support landlords. What we then want to do is move on to produce guidance working alongside the Scottish Human Rights Commission to set out how landlords can take a fully human rights-based approach in delivering their services and providing homes, and to build that into everything that they do. So more to come on that. Great question, because it is absolutely something that's very, very current.
Thanks for that, John. Thank you. Do we have any final questions before we wrap up? Anyone get any final points they want to make? Oh, John Burry or Berry?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Hi, John.
Just a thought, I find it has been mentioned about the lack of scrutiny meetings at the moment. Do people not think that this is because they need necessarily access to the internet, both for the tenants which they don't have, and maybe some that are not up to skills of using the internet, and it's causing a problem?
Yeah, sorry, do you want to answer that, Michael? I certainly wouldn't mind chipping in on that one as well.
Fine, whoever.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I think it's it's an important point. We've all kind of had to be kicking and screaming into the 21st century with how we go about doing these things. And actually, I think I've now participated in quite a few of these sessions, and on various different tools. This is on Microsoft Teams, I've done it on Zoom, I've done it in Skype, I've done it in various other things. And while it, you know, it does take a bit of getting used to, and probably the biggest challenge is remembering to take yourself off mute. That's always a good one. But you know, I actually think it has the potential to increase engagement and participation. I think there are a large number of people who would have struggled to get to an event, a meeting that was taking place somewhere else, whereas with this, you know, they can do it from their front room. Now, that does mean that we do need to make sure that people are as connected as possible, that they have the wherewithal to meet in this way, you know, that they have broadband connectivity, that they have the right type of equipment that lets them engage. I think more and more landlords are looking at how they can support tenants and residents to do that, because they see the benefits of it. They can see that this is a way that they might be able to engage with increasing numbers of tenants who might be more inclined to, you know, pop into something like this for half an hour from their front room, rather than having to commit to, you know, maybe get childcare, maybe go, you know, a significant journey on public transport to get to something that's happening in a different place. So while there are challenges in it, and you've highlighted those, I think there's also real opportunities in this.
Yeah, I think Margaret Anderson has just suggested that maybe some of the savings made from TP budgets could be used to buy tech for tenants to help support them. But it's not just the tech, you need the connectivity, the Wi-Fi. And I know that Highland Council, working with their tenants, have seen that they've seen an upturn in the number of people, because if you think about it, if you live in Thurso and the meeting's in Inverness, you've got 2.5 hour drive, if you drive, to get to Inverness for a meeting. So they're getting a lot more new people coming on, and I feel it should be part of the tenant participation toolkit. You know, so you've got face-to-face, you've got pop-ins, you've got video, telephone, so we're adding it to the options that tenants have. Now there's somebody here got their hand up. I'm going to have to take this as the last question. I can't see who it is. Can anybody see who's got their hand up down there?
It's Vicky McKenzie.
Oh, hi there. Hello, Alistair. You've never asked a question before in a session, have you? Go ahead. Come on, Alistair.
It's Vicky.
Oh, it's Vicky. I thought you said it was Rookie, and I thought that's why I was winding him up. Sorry, Vicky. Sorry.
Sarah Leslie, you must know me by now. Anyway.
I do.
I mean, it was in response to what we're saying about the meetings and people that don't have technology not being involved. Now, we've had virtual meetings in Aberdeen for quite a while now on Teams, but what we've had, because we have a few older members who don't have and don't want technology, so we've included them by telephone. So we can telephone them and they can still be part of the meeting, although they can't actually see the people, but they can still be part of the discussion, even though they don't have the technology, which I think is great. And I will agree that the technology does open up the scope for attracting new members that we possibly wouldn't have got. And it's an ongoing issue for us in Aberdeen, and I'm sure everywhere else, is to attract more members, because every year we lose people, you know, through illness. I mean, a number of our members in Aberdeen are older or have underlying health conditions. So, you know, we couldn't possibly go out and have meetings just now. I mean, it's just absolutely impossible. So this way we can stay connected. And it also, you know, to go back to an earlier point that you were saying, is that it relieves that anxiety, depression that many of us will, that sense of isolation that many people will have suffered. But to go back to, Michael, what you were saying about the effective governance from in view of the current restrictions, what I was also thinking was about is decisions that have been made like last year for this year, and maybe the next 2 or 3 years will have impacted. And we may see in the light of what's happening now that those decisions that were taken weren't the right decisions. And what I'm thinking about particularly is in Aberdeen, excuse me, for very good reasons, we voted for, tenants voted for and agreed on a 4% increase for the next 3 years. Now that seemed like a good idea at the time because it gave the council security in knowing how much rent they would get. It gave the tenant security because they knew how much the rises were going to be every year, instead of having this, we've got to do this, we've got to have the tenants agree, and then we've got to go back to committee and they've got to agree. So that uncertainty, we thought was a good idea. Now, in view of the fact that many people may have lost their jobs, many people will have been ill, they may have long COVID, all of these things that we may have, and subsequently may have rent arrears increases. So we don't know how this is going to impact on us next year and the year after. So it's those kind of decisions, I think, that we need to be reviewing regularly and what we can do about that, because this is a set in stone agreement, if you know what I mean. It's what we've agreed as tenants and it's now set in stone, so we don't know really if we can go back and change that. So it's a difficult time, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Landlords, local authorities, housing associations will have set out plans, possibly for 2, 3, 5, 30 years that map out how they think they will need to take matters forward over that period. The world has just shifted. It's changed massively. And I think it's kind of incumbent on every landlord to take a bit of a step back and say, well, that might be what we had set out, 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever, but does it still hold good? And I think it will be important, particularly for things like investment plans and rent increases, that landlords engage again with tenants to say, okay, things have changed. What do we think? Does this still remain relevant? You say it's kind of set in stone. I think
it is, but I'm not sure it's that.
Yeah, I think nothing can be set in stone at the moment because of such major upheaval and change. It's absolutely critical that every landlord takes that step back, looks at their business plan and says, what now? Does that still hold good, or are we going to have to think differently?
But I think it's a bit of going back to tenants and saying all that and saying, look, we know we agreed to fit 25 new kitchens in Torry this year, but is that our priority, or is going back and doing the maintenance, the general maintenance of this going to be the priority? Or is it going to be building the new houses in Summerhill that we'd agreed to? So it's all about those offsets, isn't it, Michael? I mean, it's our choices.
Absolutely, it's choices, and some of those are quite hard choices, and it's about making those decisions with as much information in front of you as you possibly can, and ensuring that tenants are involved in that process. Because the one thing which I'm absolutely certain of is tenants are realistic and pragmatic. They will know that it's not possible just to keep going as the plan had originally been. Things have changed so dramatically that it's critical that you sit down with your landlord and say, okay, what do we do now? How do we respond to the changes that have happened? And what does that mean for what we might have expected over the coming period? And having that kind of mature conversation about what's the right way to go now.
Okay, that's been really useful, and thank you everyone for your contributions, and thanks especially to Michael for coming along. We've had a very open session. I think it's been a really good morning so far. Only another 2 days to go, people. So hopefully I'll see you along. I'm certainly really happy with the way it's going. I can only thank everybody and Michael here for your time, and everyone for your contributions, and for all the contributions and solutions that's come to the floor as well. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'll see you the same time tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.